Alright, so today we're going to be talking about The Amazing Spider-Man number 10. This is a Judgment Day tie-in. If you're a Marvel fan, you would instantly know what that is. It's basically some Avengers, X-Men, Eternals event happening in the background where they established every superhero is getting judged or whatnot. I don't know, that's as far as I know. Something to do with the Celestials, and all I know about the Celestials is what I've read in the original Eternals run by Jack Kirby. But anyways, I'm gonna be spoiling and talking about the entire story, so if you haven't read it and you want to read it before you listen to me talk about this, then probably do so. But without further ado, let's begin. Alright, so the story begins with this news broadcast that's explaining the premise behind this week's story. There's this Celestial that gets woken up, named Progenitor. I believe that's how it's pronounced. I'm not sure. I don't know anything about the Celestials in modern time besides what I read in the original Eternals run by Jack Kirby, but that's something else. But anyways, they explain how he mentioned that he's giving everyone on planet Earth 24 hours to justify themselves and their existence. It will be judging them individually as well as a collective whole. And today is Judgment Day. So there's random reports of random acts of kindness going out throughout the day because people want to be judged appropriately. They want to be judged in a good way. They don't know what's going to happen if they get judged poorly. Even I don't know what's going to happen because I've only been exposed to people that have been approved by them. But anyways, yeah, people are just trying to be friendly. They're trying to be nice to show off to the Celestial that they're going to get judged in approval. So anyways, as the broadcast is happening in the background and explaining the entire scenario for the story, Peter Parker's on the phone talking to someone, only for it to be revealed that he's talking to Iron Man. And Peter Parker's asking Iron Man whether all of this stuff is real, if it's actually happening, and Iron Man basically acknowledges everything. He's like, yeah, dude, everything is happening. We're getting judged. The Celestial takes the form of an omnipresent being, so he's basically everywhere, watching everyone, judging everyone. Sometimes he appears as himself, sometimes as a person from the past. So Peter, at this point, he's like, okay, so if someone who should be dead shows up and stares at me in a very judgmental way, I'm probably not crazy. And this is where the editors forgot that this is a question and put a period instead of a question mark. But anyways, it's just a small thing that I noticed here. And Tony Stark responds with, in this particular instance, no. Why do you ask? And Peter goes, oh, no reason. And then it's a full page splash of Gwen just by the doorway staring right at him. So at this point, the judging basically starts at that point for Peter Parker. Later, his friend Randy's at the door, and Peter Parker's asking Randy if he sees Gwen, but of course he doesn't, only Peter can see her. So this is where they establish that only the person who's being judged can see the person that's following them. Or in this case, the Celestial, not a person. But Randy's trying to convince Peter to follow him and help him out in choosing a suit for Randy's wedding. Apparently Janice, who he's getting married to, doesn't believe in all that stuff. This is like kind of a plot hole that I've noticed. She doesn't believe in all that stuff, but it is established in this story that everyone gets followed and everyone gets judged. So Janice, as well as Randy, should also have someone following them and judging them. But anyways, whatever. Story's sake, right? So Peter finally agrees to go with Randy to go choose out his suit. And they're in the business where there's an old guy just measuring out Randy, helping him get a suit, of course, for his wedding. After a little bit, Randy asks him what he's gonna do for the rest of the day, and Peter looks over at Gwen and thinks, oh, he might go see Aunt May, see if she needs anything. So next, we get to a scene where it's just Peter Parker and Aunt May sitting on a table, staring at each other and just talking. Aunt May is very appreciative that Peter Parker helped her fix the faucet that she was having issues with. Peter says that, of course, it's no problem. He's just there to help her out. And after being there for a little bit, he tells her that he has to check out on a few other people to make sure that they're doing okay during this scenario. And as he's walking out, he asks again if she's gonna need anything or if she's sure that she's gonna be fine being alone. And she agrees. Why? Well, the person that the Celestial takes form of that's judging Aunt May basically took the form of Ben Parker. And I thought this was a really sweet moment right here where for once in Aunt May's life, she has Ben basically right by her side. Of course, I assume maybe in a similar creepy fashion as Gwen, but in this frame, it's basically showing Ben reassuring Aunt May, in a body language sort of way. Basically, the artist telling us that, yeah, Ben's just there keeping her company, as well as, judging her, of course. And then we get to a scene where Peter's inside of J. Jonah Jameson's office, and JJ's freaking out because, of course, he feels like an asshole for hiring that one scientist to create the Spider Slayers, as well as being the one responsible for the creation of the Scorpion. So he's freaking the hell out, trying to apologize to everyone, saying that, like, oh, I know I did so bad, I know I did all this, sorry, I apologize. Of course, he's trying to be good on the Celestials' terms. And then the phone rings, and of course it's Robbie, who I'm assuming worked for JJ. It doesn't look like he's in this at the moment. But JJ starts apologizing to Robbie, talking about how he has been an asshole to him as well, apparently would grossly underpay him, and just be an overall asshole for the past 50 years that this character has existed. But as he's on the phone with Robbie, he gets interrupted by Peter, who looks over at JJ and he's just like, yeah, dude, I know you created all this mess, you also underpaid me for all the bad things you have done for me. Specifically, I forgive you. JJ, of course, appreciates the fact that Peter Parker forgives him for all the crazy nonsense. JJ was a huge asshole to Peter in the first few, or not the first few stories, but, the original Amazing Spider-Man run. He would underpay him, basically talk trash about him. But at some point, JJ ended up growing attached to Peter Parker and stopped being too much of an ass. And then the next scene, we get Spider-Man, who's just on the roof of a building, with Gwen just standing right behind him, of course, just continuously judging him. Spider-Man's just talking to himself as well as this figure of Gwen, and he brings up Ben Reilly. He's on top of a roof that apparently that's where Peter Parker would go to think about things, and because Ben Reilly's his clone, he assumes that at some point, someday, he's gonna encounter him on that same rooftop because, they're clones, so they would go to the same place to think about life. But this also confused me. I don't know where they're grabbing the lore about Ben being the clone, because currently I'm reading the Amazing Spider-Man's Clone Saga, and unless they retconned Ben Reilly being the real Spider-Man, this part doesn't make any sense to me. But that's what I'm going with when I'm reading this story, just automatically assuming that, yeah, Ben Reilly's the clone, and this Spider-Man that I'm reading about is the real one. And then the next page is Spider-Man with Miles Morales. They both look like they took down Rocket Racer, which is a very vintage villain from the old days. It's just a guy, a villain, robbing banks on his rocket skateboard. That's basically the premise. But yeah, it's Spider-Man and Miles Morales. They're just chilling out. Spider-Man tells him that he's very proud of Miles, very proud to share the title with him of Spider-Man. And of course, Gwen is watching all this happen, so she's watching and judging Spider-Man basically be friendly and giving his 2 cents of every character. And then night comes around and Peter Parker is gonna go to sleep. And this is basically like a page that's just acknowledging how creepy Gwen is just staring at him falling asleep. That was most likely meant to be like a funny joke kind of page. The creepy factor definitely kicks in. And then the next morning hit and Peter Parker's on the phone talking to someone about his job. He doesn't want to come in because he feels totally under the weather, but of course in reality he doesn't want to deal with work at the same time that he's dealing with being judged, I guess. Probably also doesn't want to have Gwen Stacy in the same space as Norman Osborn, who's going to be there, who's basically his boss. As a lot of people know, Norman Osborn is also Green Goblin, who was the one that basically killed Gwen Stacy, tossed her off the bridge. But in reality, it was Spider-Man's incompetence that killed her. Let's be honest here. But that's a debate for another day. So we cut to Peter Parker's job, where he's talking to Kamala Khan about the experiment that they're about to run that day. Peter asks her if they can reschedule it for another day, but she's like, "Dude, you're the one who told me that I get to decide when we get to actually run this experiment. If you trusted me for this, And of course he inevitably agrees, and this is where Norman Osborn shows up. And then Norman starts talking about basically getting the experiment up and running because, of course, that's the day they decided to do it. And he starts telling Peter like, yeah, dude, of course I'm here. Did you think I'd stay home after asking everyone else to work? That's not what I do here. That's not the kind of way I treat my employees. But Peter Parker's nervous. He notices how Gwen's making a face towards Norman. So Peter Parker freaks out and yells at Norman. And Norman's just like, yeah, dude, if you feel this strongly about this, I completely understand. I'm gonna be in my office. Norman hasn't done anything bad yet, I guess, besides kill Gwen. But, in his supposedly good life right now, he hasn't done anything bad. So Peter's really just being an asshole for no reason, in my opinion. And as Norman walks away, Peter Parker looks over at Gwen. Gwen's looking basically away, looking like it's a disapproval looking face. Peter's definitely worried. He sees her going through the ceiling, so he chases after her. And this is where we get a panel where Kamala Khan's also talking to her own version of the Celestial, which takes the form of Carol Danvers. As many of you already know, Captain Marvel. She explains how, I told you he was weird. You saw me being nice to him, right? Basically explaining to the Celestial like, yeah, dude, you know Peter Parker's weird, so I tried being nice to him. In this story, Kamala seems more normal, not as goofy, not as clumsy as her first appearance in this specific run, which is a pretty good change of pace. I like her just overall not being goofy and like being just a regular character. But here we change scenes. Spider-Man's on the roof with Gwen Stacy. Or not on the roof. It looks like a place where people go sit, but they're also outside. Anyways, for the sake of simplicity, I'm just going to say the roof. So they're on the roof, and Peter believes that this is a sign of disapproval by the Celestial. Also by Gwen, because he keeps seeing her as Gwen. And he's trying to explain himself like, I know you're upset, I'm working for Norman, and I understand, but I also know you're not Gwen. Not really. I'd feel it if you were. You're something else. Maybe my memories of her, maybe the Celestial knew how I often asked myself what Gwen would think of me, and how I've lived my life since she died. So this is where we get a very intense moment of the Celestial just doing its thing and giving Peter Parker the thumbs up of approval. It's kind of lackluster that he gets this regular side panel of getting the thumbs up, when I've seen online of other characters getting their thumbs up in a whole one-page splash, but whatever, man, who cares? It still gets the story across. Peter Parker gets approved by the Celestial. And so this is where the Celestial gives Peter Parker a gift. What is this gift? Well, it revives Gwen Stacy for a small amount of time, just to talk to Peter. And they just get this very heartwarming moment where they just acknowledge each other's time that has gone by. Of course, Peter Parker looks much older, and she questions that. And then they both tell each other that, yeah, they've of course missed each other. Back in the original comics, they were like my favorite couple, and then MJ came along, but at first I didn't like MJ until she actually showed off that she was a decent character with a lot of character development. But as the first, or I guess second girlfriend, I don't remember, but as one of the early girlfriends for Peter Parker, Gwen was one of the best ones for sure. I'm pretty sure it was the second girlfriend, behind Betty Brant. But yeah, this was a very heartwarming moment. If you read the original run with the entire Gwen Stacy, story, this hits pretty close. If you didn't, I mean, I'm sure everyone already knows the thing about Gwen. It's just her falling off the bridge and dying. So you might still get something out of this, but not as an emotional feel as you would, of course, reading the original comics. But I liked it. It was great. And then she slowly disappears, leaving Peter Parker behind and alone on the roof. But what is this? He's actually not alone, because on the last 2 pages of the comic, it shows off how Norman was actually watching this entire event happen. So he's questioning, like, what? Gwen's alive? And he was talking to her? She was real? Stop, Norman. Pull it together. You're fine. Everything is fine. So he basically gaslits himself into thinking that everything is fine, only to reveal on the very last panel this is my interpretation. I don't know what's up with what, but on the very last panel, we get Gwen directly behind Norman Osborn. So this led me to believe that the celestial ghost character that followed him around for the entire 24 hours was also Gwen, pretty much judging everything that he has gone through his entire life. But this was a small moment where he actually got to see Gwen being alive, you know, when he was talking to Peter. And this is basically where the story ends. I do really like this issue. This I would say this is definitely one of my more favorite issues of this specific run. It's definitely a pretty fun read. It's very emotional. We get a few extra characters like Miles and Kamala Khan. And overall, it was a very good issue. Although the art, it was okay. For the most part, it was alright. Sometimes the faces of the characters were very... I don't know if exaggerated is the correct word, but it felt very, very weird. Like, sometimes Peter would make... like, when he was yelling at Osborn, he made this very funny looking face. Like, I know he's trying to be serious, trying to, like, maybe tell Osborn to just walk away from this scenario, but... he's like yelling at him, and the artwork for his face just looks unusually goofy, which kind of takes me out of the story because I just take a moment out of my day to just make fun of how funny he looks before I continue reading. And also, Norman Osborn makes some funny faces. Like, whoever did the penciling for this story is a goofy ass motherfucker. Nah, it was alright, but you know, some of the faces were still very exaggerated. But overall, it was a very solid issue. I really enjoyed it. And if you enjoyed me talking about this nerdy stuff, make sure to leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you guys for the next issue. Whether it's The Amazing Spider-Man or Spider-Verse, because those seem to be the only two comics that I'm covering. But anyways, I appreciate you guys for listening to me talk about this week's Amazing Spider-Man number 10. Thank you all for listening, and I'll see you next time. Peace.